All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of, this is Kingdom Builders. More coming from the financial side with Derek Delaney from Farm D Financial. Howdy, Derek.
How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for joining me today on this. Just for timing purposes, it's the middle of summer. We're right before the 4th of July. And so I think it's a fun time of year, isn't
Oh,
it?
absolutely. And it's beautiful out in my area of the country in the Midwest. So this is the time of year where everybody's in a really good mood and the sun is out. It's a holiday weekend, so things are going great.
That's amazing. And I think it will tie in well with what we're talking about here because I love bringing you on for kind of having the financial outlook as far as Kingdom Impact, because that's again, like a lot of us kind of try to focus on, is how building wealth and impact for the kingdom, right? And I
100%.
just think the topic today is sowing bountifully, right? So the apostle says in the Second Corinthians, whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. So, and a lot of times I don't know if it's just now that I've gone into like full business mode, like I go towards finances when I start thinking about that and investments and and down that path.
Yep.
But this can be, you can put this kind of mentality into like everything you do in life, right?
Well, 100%. I think that quote is one of those unique kind of sayings that it's like an environmental law, right? A law of our world that if you give or contribute in the world, you will eventually get as much or more back. But it gets really difficult to follow because you have to put a lot of faith in the latter half of that quote, and you have to put a lot of your own time and energy and maybe financial resources up front, hoping that it pays off in the long run when there's no guarantees. But most of the time, people who are able to give or contribute in life in a bountiful way, they get that in return at some point in the future. And that could be from an investment standpoint, it could be from a time standpoint, it could be starting your business or from a career standpoint. But it's a lot easier said than done.
I like how you said that there, because a lot of times in scripture it talks about, everything's compared to the harvest and the field and the farmer, right? Where you're sowing in the springtime and you're reaping in fall during harvest. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot, that's, a lot of times if you think about that, there's a lot that can happen in between those two periods of time, you know. And I like how you said that in that second half of that, that's where you have to wait. That's where you have to be patient. That's where you still have to work and have faith that something's going to happen from that efforts you put forth.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And you can only control what you can control today. And the word you use sum that up perfectly, and that is faith. In between those two periods, regardless of how long it is between what you give and what you get back, you have to have faith in return that you're going to get something back.
Yeah.
And again, easier said than done, but for a lot of people, regardless of what area in life they're applying this to, it usually works out. And that's why I think that quote is more of a universal law of our environment for anybody, regardless of what circumstance you find yourself in.
Do you have some good examples for us outside of the finances? I know, I mean, you being a financial planner, it's easy to go straight to investments and things like that. But how about what are some examples that come to mind when just like, just that people can live by or focus on as they're going about their day, trying to better themselves?
Yeah, I think the two biggest and easiest examples outside of finance that I think are very comparable, one would be relationships, and two is your health. I mean, each of those instances, it's not an overnight success. Let's just say you want to train and get in shape to run a marathon, you're not going to be able to do that in a week. Let's just say that you want to fall in love, get married, and have a wonderful family and find that perfect someone you can spend the rest of your life with. That takes effort, that takes a lot of output in the beginning. And in each of those instances, it doesn't seem like you're getting a whole lot back in return instantly for the effort you're putting forth. I mean, if you go out and you run your first mile when you're training for a marathon, you're going to feel sore, tired, and you're going to think to yourself, how the heck am I going to go 25 more miles to accomplish this goal? but you keep putting in the time, you keep putting in the effort, you keep contributing toward that specific goal. And in the end, because of the universal law we talked about, your body is able to adjust. You will get in shape, and there is a high likelihood that you will accomplish what you want at the end. And I think even more important is the relationship side. I mean,
Yeah.
we both know that that is a continuous work in progress, regardless of how great your relationship is. There's always give and take. And you have to have faith that if you do the right things, and we all know what the right things are in the beginning, even if it takes time and talent away from you initially, those things are going to pay off and your life is going to be easier, better, and more fulfilling long term because of it. So health and relationships, I think, are two perfect scenarios outside of investing that I feel this quote applies really, really well to.
I really like how you brought in relationships to this one. I was not even thinking about that. I just heard a podcast this morning where, uh, you know, he talked about something about the most successful people. Like, really, if you look at funerals and when people die, like nothing ever. It's always the relationships that matter at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's coming with, on their deathbed. I want to see my diplomas. I want to see my, my investment portfolio. They're like, no, bring me the people I love. I want to see them before I go, right? I love that. I love how you said that. But yeah, like you said, there's a lot of sowing that goes into that, into those relationships for all those years. Cool.
100%. And again, to be able to contribute as much as you can to reap the rewards long term of money, health, relationships, you have to have a lot of faith. There's no substitute for that, because the feedback you're going to get and the reaping of what you put out there initially is going to be very little, if anything, right? But over a long enough period of time, if you keep the faith and you continue to contribute to whatever it is you're contributing to, it will eventually pay off.
Fascinating. I love that. That's almost like the 401k right there. It's like, yeah, it's like so tiny, incremental going on. But, look, years go by and it's like, okay, that was good. That was good.
Well, the most powerful tool we have in the world of finance is the ability to compound, right?
Yeah.
It's making more money off of money you made previously. Compounding also applies to every other area of life. The more you put in, the greater reaping you have of what you've contributed on top of previous success. And then it just builds and it gets bigger and faster. And then that momentum, that flywheel really starts to turn, whether it's with your health or relationships or anything else. And things get easier, more enjoyable, and grander farther down the line.
Yeah.
In the beginning, it is not like that. And you need faith to be able to start and contribute when there is almost zero positive feedback coming to you in return.
I just thought of being intentional too. Like, I look at myself in my 20s and maybe even the early 30s, how I wasn't intentional with a lot of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I missed out on a lot of compounding interest right there with relationships or with careers, things like that, where it was just kind of like I was just really, I don't know if I want to say happy and free, but it wasn't like I didn't have a purpose, right? I was a pharmacist. I was making money. That was it. Like, I didn't have a goal in mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I missed out on a lot of those intentional places to put energy and effort, and not even 401k, because I did that right when I was early in my career. I just maxed out my 401k at the chain I worked at the corporation.
Yep.
That was good, but then everything else into it is like, wow,
But you can't let that I wish I would have done this in the past drag you down and keep you from doing what you know needs to be done today. What's the quote, where what's the best time to plant a tree 20 years ago? What's the second best time to plant a tree today?
I love that.
And you said you need to be intentional. And I think that comes with a lot of focus and worrying about today and keeping your focus on what you can control in the moment, in the present, currently, and not putting too much focus or pressure on yourself long term. I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like Matthew 3:34, where that verse talks about how Jesus said that you need to focus on today. There's enough problems today. That is where your head needs to be. And you need to put trust in God that he will provide what needs to be provided when it comes to your future. You can't control it. You have no control over it. Put that burden on God and let him take that off your shoulders, and you focus on what you can control today. With that mindset and faith and dropping the baggage of your past, it really allows you to take intentional action today and do what needs to be done to give and to start that compounding effect, regardless of what area you're trying to apply it to.
I have no rebuttal. I have nothing to say. That was amazing, Derek. That was so good. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I was thinking about Isaiah there. It's kind of like where, do not focus on the past. I'm doing a new thing today. Focus on today. That was perfect. But yeah, that was well said. I love that. Man, okay.
It's such an easy to understand quote.
Mm-hmm.
It's universal in everything we do. In your opinion, Sean, what keeps most people from applying it in their life? If you had to guess.
I'm going to say something that around the either fear or paralysis and not knowing what to do and not knowing where to apply, right? I think just looking back at some of the stuff I've tried to do, people will have that imposter syndrome, or they think they're not good enough to do something. So then they don't even start going down a certain path and applying energies to whatever it is they want to do. I think that could be a reason.
I agree. I think imposter syndrome is a huge one, that people underestimate their abilities and what they can truly accomplish. I think the other big one is fear of putting yourself out there and not getting that reward in the end. Because there have been plenty of times through a number of different circumstances that anybody listening to this can appreciate, I'm sure, of you doing something or putting work in to create something. In long term, it doesn't click, it doesn't pay off.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, well, I'm just banging my head against the wall and it didn't work if I did this. So what happens if it doesn't work again? I'm just that much farther behind. I don't want to take that chance. But really, not taking the chance, in my opinion, is the true risk, because then you are completely eliminating the shot of it actually working and paying off in the end.
Yeah.
That's like saying, I want to get married, I want to fall in love, I want to have a family, but I had a really bad relationship 3 years ago and I don't want to get hurt again. Well, you are pigeonholing yourself into never even getting a shot at accomplishing long-term what you want from a relationship standpoint. Same thing with investments. I mean, people could be saving their entire life and then we hit a recession like we did in 2007, 2008, and everything comes crashing down. You lose 50% of your portfolio and you go, I'm never going to experience that again. So you take all your money and you hide it under your mattress. And you miss out on all the wonderful opportunities that came afterwards. So I think imposter syndrome is a big one. I think for a lot of people, and you can tell me if you agree or not, they have tried things in life that haven't worked out or have flamed out miraculously, and they don't want to have to deal with that again because they think it's going to happen over and over and over again. And that is where faith comes in, and intentional focus on what you can control today and not putting too much pressure on yourself into the future can be extremely valuable.
I like that. I think too, pivoting, I think people need to be able to pivot and take the lessons they've learned. Good example with RPH Ally, right? Started back in 2019 was when I first talked to my developer, launched in 2020. I had this great plan of helping pharmacists with corresponding responsibility. Mm-hmm. And then we threw a network on top of it, the actual corresponding responsibility service, the app, that piece of it, like fell flat, didn't have the right data or partners. Fine, kept going, right? Mm-hmm. And we were podcasting, doing this back in 22 to 23, and then of course we had to take a long break because I had to go get another job, right? And but yet I think it was still sowing and having that faith, and then being it, because now it's a large community to still market to, that we can still help. There's a huge group of pharmacists connected here that we're sending these emails to, and I think we can still help them somehow, right? I mean, that's kind of my goal, right? So it's not about always being successful in the way we think we're being successful, as long as we stay there, keep sowing, have faith, and at some point there's going to be some harvest that we're going to be able to be a part of.
100%. And oftentimes that harvest is completely different than what we were shooting for to begin with.
Yeah.
Right?
Very true.
I'm going to butcher this quote, but God smiles when we say we have a plan, because we don't know what the ultimate plan is.
Yeah.
in that regard, we have very little control, but that is freeing because you are putting your future in the hands of somebody who has way more power in what is going to happen in your life. And oftentimes, if we shoot and we fail and we come up short, how do we know that that's not the best case scenario? And that's
Yeah.
just going to snowball into the next thing and the next thing. And all of a sudden, you're going to be in a position now that you otherwise would not have been
Yeah.
if that first thing you tried was a success.
I
And
mean,
living life like that, it gets much more enjoyable, and stress just releases off of you when you understand that your success or failure in life is not 100% dependent on the decisions you made. It's because that is what was supposed to happen within the grander plan.
I love it. You brought me. I mean, my one of my favorite scriptures is Ephesians 3:20, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
God, He can do immeasurably more than all you can ask for or imagine, right? That's where I love that little quote that you brought up, and I'm gonna compound on that. Where it's what's the one we've heard where, uh, we establish, or we have our plan, but God establishes our steps, or
Yeah.
we have an idea, God establishes our steps, or something like that, right? Where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, and that's how I feel like a lot of my, the last 5 years, it's really gone that way where it's like I have these ideas, I think I know what I'm doing, but then all of a sudden you get course corrected, like, no, we're gonna do this instead,
Yep.
you know. Um, and then how you said, like, it's most of like the results are gonna be better than what you could have come up with yourself.
Yep.
True.
100%. And I personally believe this. The effort you put in, regardless of if it produces success or not in the long term, is irrelevant. The effort in the beginning is when you're old and you're on your deathbed or that type of scenario. That's what you're going to be most proud of. You're going to be most proud of you taking the chance, putting the effort in, and the outcome when you're that age at the end of life doesn't matter. And if we can pull that perspective into present day, life gets so much easier and more enjoyable, and it allows us to continue to give even more and more in life, because that is what matters. The outcome is just a byproduct.
Yeah. Go back to a couple segments ago. You talked about being at peace or not having that worry. Can you go a little bit deeper on that one and what that means to you?
Yeah. So again, I think we keep ourselves from doing things that are going to be beneficial to us and get us closer to accomplishing our goals. We sabotage ourselves because of fear and because of the stress of the unknown in regards to the future. Well, if I do this, it might not pay off, and then I'm all out this money and this time. Or if I do this, people might think oddly of me, and the image of me out there at that time will be different than what I want it to be. Or if I put myself out there, I may get rejected or dumped or hurt, or I could invest money and lose half of it. All of these things start percolating in your head about what could go wrong based off of actions you are maybe thinking about taking today. And that just builds stress and anxiety. And you can kind of flip that on its head and go, the action today is what matters. The outcome is completely irrelevant because we don't have control of that. So it shouldn't matter to us, and it shouldn't matter to our decision making today within reason. And if you can flip it, and it's really, really hard to do, and it takes practice and it takes kind of that muscle memory to get good at it. But if you can focus on today without that worry of what it's going to produce or what it won't produce into the future, a lot of that stress and anxiety just kind of get taken away because of all those reasons we talked about. And then the next day it's going to come back again. So again, it's like working a muscle where you have to focus on what you do today and not worry as much about the future, because it's not in our hands at long term anyway. And that's kind of a good thing, because if we can't control it long term, it means we don't have to worry or stress about it today.
Sounds easy, don't
Right? That's what I said.
it?
Just like the quote, it's easy. In practice, it should be something everybody should apply, but it
Yeah.
is unbelievably difficult to do over and over again, day after day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will have its own troubles, right?
Oh, 100%. And that's kind of what I help walk my clients through. I go, we're making decisions today based off of all the knowledge we have today. We're doing a really good job of accumulating all the information we need to make a smart decision today. And when that decision is made, you just kind of got to let it go. You can't worry about what it could turn into or what it can't turn into in the future. We just have to iterate along the way and make the next smartest decision tomorrow or the next day or the next day, and not put so much pressure on ourselves to think about what could go right or what could go wrong 5, 10, 15 years from now, because that will drive a person crazy because we don't have control of that to begin with.
Indeed. Love it, man. How about going the other way? This has all been very positive, which is good. I love the positivity. How about sowing negative thoughts and negative actions, right? I mean,
Well, we talked about the power of compounding. It works in both directions.
yeah.
And if your outlook on life is this is never going to work out, this isn't going to be good. And we talked about this in the previous podcast episode when we talked about the book Think and Grow Rich. Your future is shaped by what you think. What goes on between your ears is immensely powerful as far as creating a future for yourself, especially shorter term future. In my opinion, longer term, it's up to the big guy upstairs. But if your outlook on life is negative and glass is always half empty and it's always cloudy and I can't enjoy anything because I'm always worried and stressed about the future, that is a cycle that you will continue to ruminate on, and it will get worse and worse and worse faster because of that compounding effect before you butt up against a brick wall and you can't handle it anymore. But we have the power to flip it. I heard this somewhere where one of the most powerful psychological studies or findings that have come out over the last 10 years is that our reality is, I'm going to butcher it, it's like our reality is what we say it is or how we interpret it, right? If you were walking across the street and you fell and you skinned your knee, you could either get up and go, oh, I skinned my knee, this sucks, it's going to be a terrible day. Or you can get up and say, oh, I skinned my knee, but I got across the road, I'm that much closer to where I'm going. Put a Band-Aid on there, that sucker will heal, I'm moving forward. Or if you're working in a field where you're dealing with customers and a customer calls and you see their name come up on a caller ID, your first thought could be, oh no, why are they calling? They must be upset, something must have gone wrong. You are creating your own reality with those thoughts before it even comes to fruition. Or you could say, hey, this customer name comes up, I'm glad they called. It gives me an opportunity to talk with them and to share more value with them and maybe provide them with X, Y, and Z service and just put a cherry on top of our relationship. That type of thinking is going to grow and compound. Or the other side of it, the negative side of it, that type of thinking is going to grow and compound, and that's what shapes your reality. Now, there's no proven science behind that, and there could be a bunch of people who go, that's a bunch of malarkey. But in my experience, it is true, and there are a bunch of people who are older and wiser who agree with that as well.
Yeah.
And that's why there have been numerous books written about specifically just that. So if you want life to kind of remain in the gutter and things to work below average, don't have faith, think you can control the future, and ruminate on all the bad things you have going on and let that compound. And that is probably the worst direction in life you could go, in my opinion. Do the opposite.
Do the opposite. I love it, Derek, man.
Hey, it's easier said than done, though, right?
Yeah.
And
and that I believe, I mean, that at least for us at Kingdom Builders, like we want to help people focus on getting in those good daily routines of diving into scripture, strengthening your mind and your resolve. So when, building your faith on the rock, right? On the cornerstone. So when those things come, you can handle it. You're not phased like other people are. And that's, and that's where it's like, I feel like that's why I'm doing this now, is because that's how I've lived the last couple of years. And it's amazing. Like, it's not sunshine and rainbows hardly at all, but it's like, I feel like it almost could be, because it's like, I'm not worried about it. Right. And you have that faith walking forward. So this is awesome, Derek. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Anyways, the whole point of the talk today is, well, it's kind of you reap what you sow, but we want you to sow bountifully and reap bountifully on all the positive things. And it takes work. It takes intentionality. and it takes a lot of faith, but you just got to keep going. So, Derek, I love you, man. I appreciate you hopping on again, and we will see you next time. Happy 4th of July.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it. Looking forward to it again.
All right. Take care.